If you're like me, then you've noticed that every other month it feels like fast food prices and food prices in general at restaurants have just skyrocketed. Every time you go out for drinks or dinner, expect to fork over at least $100, unless you go to Chili's, where $50 can get two people a pretty good meal. We'll talk about Chili's later. Overall, it's just become comical just how pricey restaurants and fast food has just become. Staple food places like Chipotle have logged one of their worst quarters in a very long time. In their fancy business lingo, they basically blamed young people. Well, guys, sorry that Gen Z and millennials don't want to spend $15 for a tiny burrito that is just plain mid.
Chipotle, why is it $23.92 for one burrito? $7 for an extra serving of meat in your burrito. That's insane. You guys are so freaking corrupt.
People have gone on social media exposing just how high prices have gone up at places like Chipotle. Other fast food places like McDonald's, they apologize for increasing their prices.
In our industry, traffic for lower income consumers is down double digits. Group of consumers which are in that middle and lower income, we needed to step in with something like what we're doing.
I mean, it's become very hard to justify a $10 Big Mac. This is a story about sticky inflation and affordability squeeze, and sprinkled in there, there's a bit of corporate greed. We have entered a time in society where financing a burrito on a 4-time payment plan is possible. Yeah, something seriously wrong has happened in our society. Let's dive into it. In November, Chipotle published their public earnings results, and what was discovered may shock you, or maybe not if you haven't been living under a rock. Chipotle stock has tumbled over the past year. There's a lot to unpack here, and it really sets up the story for what's going on here. Here's a very long statement PR checked. A bunch of people looked at it, all that corporate lingo from the Chipotle CEO. Notice how he kind of shifts the blame here. And I quote, "Earlier this year, as consumer sentiment declined sharply, we saw a broad-based pullback in frequency across all income cohorts. Since then, the gap has widened, with low to middle income guests further reducing frequency. We believe that this guest with household income below 100,000 represents around 40% of our total sales, and based on our data, is dining out less due to concerns about the economy and inflation. A particular challenge cohort is the 25 to 35-year-old age group. We believe that this trend is not unique to Chipotle and is occurring across all restaurants, as well as many discretionary categories." Let me translate this for you. Let me spell it out for you in a way. So essentially, he said, screw you, Gen Z and young millennials. And a popular suspect here, blaming the entire economy for declining sales. But in my opinion, it's a lot more complicated than that. If consumers' appetite to spend was so bad, then why are we hearing success stories from restaurants like Chili's? Well, in my opinion, I think young people are sick of getting ripped off.
Buying chips and guac from Chipotle make me feel like whenever I go to Starbucks, I'm actually getting a good deal. Because tell me why this little amount of guacamole is $5. This could have been a matcha latte. And sure, you get some stale chips with it, but $5 is crazy for just this small amount.
Exactly. $5 for guac isn't popular anymore, especially since that same guac used to cost $2 just 5 or 6 years ago. The price increases of Chipotle honestly aren't even that justified. It's far outpaced the rate of inflation.
Someone sent me a picture of the Chipotle menu from around 2017, and I almost blocked them.
Now, when we look at Chili's, for example, people are going to spend more money there for sure. That's without a doubt. But the quality of the food is higher, and the amount of food you get is a lot better. You get more bang for your buck, essentially. $11 and you can get a burger, fries, a drink, and chips and salsa. That's some crazy value.
I know this sounds like a freaking ad. I try to give y'all my genuine opinion. I know some people may not agree with that. I will take this over any fast food burger combo that you can get. The Big Mac combo is now $13 where I'm at, and this is light years better. Way better meal, way better value, way better burger. It's the best deal in any chain right now. It's because of their renaissance, their comeback, whatever you want to call it. Every restaurant is following suit.
Chipotle would charge you around $11 just for one tiny burrito. And this is another annoyance people have with these type of slop bowl restaurants. The amount of value that you're getting at these slop bowl type restaurants is a huge problem for people. The quantity of the amount of food that you'll receive, a lot of times it depends on the person that's serving you. We've seen people post on social media that they've gone to several Chipotles in an area and each one has given them a different amount of food. They weighed the burrito and it weighed differently every single restaurant. It's really not like when you buy one burger or like 10 nuggets, you kind of know what you're getting. With Chipotle, it's a lot different because there's a big difference between, I don't know, 4 ounces of chicken versus 8 ounces of chicken. As consumers, I think many of us are starting to feel like we're being played for and taken advantage of by these huge companies. And yes, we've all heard of inflation. Inflation's increased literally everything, but it does not justify the price increases at places like Chipotle. And here's a major thing that you should realize. It's not Gen Z's fault that Chipotle sales have collapsed. Chipotle's prices didn't just go up with inflation, they blew past it. Between 2019 and 2024, overall core inflation, it was around 21%, while fast food prices rose around 31%. Across the board, averaged. Chipotle, meanwhile, they raised their menu prices by roughly 40 to 50%. That's way above the core inflation number and way above the fast food average number.
Chipotle has a problem that they don't understand that they have as a company. And that is, we're still upset with them for the way that they acted the last 3 years under the leadership of the previous CEO, Brian Niccol, and giving us tiny portions and then going all over social media for the last year that Brian was CEO and telling us that the portions weren't smaller and the cost hadn't gone up that much. And then having hundreds of videos come out on social media from Chipotle's own workers and store managers being like, yeah, they tell us that we only fill the spoon up so far, tap it, and the stuff falls off, and then that's the spoonful that they get. And then people started getting burritos that were only about as big as your hand when you'd order online, and the online portions were way smaller than they were supposed to be.
And you're telling me that we should feel bad for Chipotle? Heck no. A burrito that used to cost around $7.50 is now well over $11 to $13 in many cities. Guac used to cost around $2. In some markets, it's now around $4.50 to $5. I mean, me personally, when I was in college, I think I would order Chipotle all the time. It was pretty cheap. It was affordable. $7 for a burrito? Sure, as a college student, that is a pretty decent deal. But now it seems like Chipotle really isn't a good deal. Heck, I'd rather just make tacos or a burrito on my own. It'll taste better too. You even had some instances where beef prices actually fell in the year 2023. Avocado prices also hit multi-year lows during that period. So there's been instances where some certain food items didn't go up that much, but it seems like Chipotle just saw inflation and was like, oh, there's a great excuse to bump up our prices and increase our profit. So when Chipotle comes out there and says young people are dining out less, what they really mean is young people simply aren't willing to pay double for a burrito or a bowl. The value has just disappeared. Not the customers, they're still there. And if we're being honest, a big part of this is corporate greed, disguised as inflation. This has happened in so many food categories in so many different industries. Just slap inflation on there and consumers will forgive you.
I think we can all agree that eating at a restaurant has become ridiculously priced in the past few years. We cook at home most of the times, but we like to go out once or twice a week. And I honestly feel like me and my husband, cannot go out to lunch or dinner without spending $50+ and we don't even drink.
Chipotle reported record revenue in 2023 and some of the strongest margins in company history. And that was amidst the company raising prices and making it public for everyone to know. Executives kept on repeating and telling their investors and shareholders that customers were resilient to price increases. They kept pushing and pushing the prices higher, another price hike here, another one next following month. not because they had to, but because they could. They kind of took advantage of the consumer. At the same time, portion sizes quietly shrank a little bit. Think of shrinkflation. Online orders got a bit smaller. The workers put smaller scoops in there, and customers were just expected to deal with it. When a company doubles its prices in 5 years and shrinks its products, posts record profits, and then blames 25 to 35-year-olds for not eating out that much, that's not an economic crisis that we're seeing. It's a self-inflicted wound by Chipotle that's driven by chasing margins and ultimately a lot of corporate greed. To add more evidence that people are spending less on restaurants, I bring you Sweetgreen. Now, don't get me wrong, this place is great sometimes. Fresh, and it has a lot of flavor in my opinion. But let me tell you, spending almost $50 for 2 slop bowl salads does not sit well with me. Apparently, a lot of people share the same grievance. Same store sales at Sweetgreen have now decreased around 9.5%, likely due to a 11.7% drop in foot traffic. I think we can attribute a lot of Sweetgreen's woes due to their high prices. And look, people are getting crafty and smart. Maybe you can just hit up your grocery store, get a pre-made salad, and grill a chicken breast, and bam, there you go. You got your Sweetgreen homemade meal for around $8. Way better than like spending $20. Another brand that we've seen lose a lot of traffic is Starbucks. Starbucks has had a very rough couple years, to say the least. Again, another culprit saying that inflation has caused them to make their prices explode. Sorry Gen Z, we have to raise that drink price by $2, even though that cost only went up $1. Sorry. Overall, we cannot ignore the fact that we're living in very different times right now. The massive amount of inflation our economy has endured. If you throw in tariffs, high rental prices, insurance, the list goes on and on about the things that have gone up.
My rent is $20,000 a month. My utilities are $6,000 a month, and my labor is currently running about $60,000 a month. That's at 28%. So I'm in for $86,000 a month before I sell a single sandwich. At a 32% food cost, I have about $11 profit in that sandwich. That means I have to sell 93,800 sandwiches a year, or 257 a day, just to break even and make no money. 1.5 million in revenue, and I don't make a dime. That's why your sandwich costs so much.
Some of these costs are being dealt to the restaurants, and in the case of Chipotle and Sweetgreen, Starbucks, you name it. They're doing their best to cling on to pre-pandemic profits and operating costs. As a result, these companies' inability to innovate or change has resulted in a massive surge of price increases who are then paid by us, the consumers. Look, why should we, the consumer, be punished to this extent? I mean, come on. In ironic fashion, Chipotle's quest to maintain high profits and rapid growth has now alienated the same consumers that helped grow that brand to the superpower that it is today. So yeah, going out and experiencing a sit-down restaurant has become super expensive, and Americans have definitely noticed.
How are people surviving right now? I just took my family to the Cheesecake Factory, okay? That's not a fancy restaurant. It's a decent restaurant. It's not something you're gonna make reservations at. 2 adults, 4 kids, all ordering off the kids menu with a tip $140. $140, which is averaging out to well over $20 per person when you're taking kids to go out to eat. I mean, we're blessed, and I'm happy we're blessed. I'm happy that we're able to afford that. I don't want to spend that much, and I don't want to have to afford that at that level. I just don't know how the average American family is getting by right now. I know the data says that the majority of people are not getting by. The majority of people are living paycheck to paycheck, and credit cards are maxed out. But when something like the Cheesecake Factory, something so simple, costs $140 for a family of 6, it just kind of seems insane. I don't know if we can ever go back to the level that we were at.
Now, Cheesecake Factory is actually doing pretty solid. That iconic brand, I think, helps them through these pretty tough times, but other restaurants have not been so lucky. And if you throw in a real-world example of just how bad things have gotten, just look at Outback Steakhouse. This is a chain that used to dominate the casual dining space not too long ago. The bloomin' onion era. I mean, people love this thing. It was the perfect embodiment of a middle-class family dinner. But now Outback is losing a bunch of customers. Left and right, they're closing down stores. The parent company has been closing restaurants, sales are dropping, and the average Outback check hit around $29 per person, which is way higher than their target customers can realistically pay. They kept on raising prices, cutting labor, and ultimately leaving their stores looking like they're trapped in 2005. Outback essentially tried to pass every rising cost onto the customer, and they cut down on the experience at the same time. They cut down on their brand equity, their brand value. It's the worst combination you can have as any brand out there. I think all this really shows just how restaurants can collapse, not just from the inflation problem, but just being completely out of touch with what people can actually afford, being out of touch with their middle class audience and customer base. But if you contrast this with Texas Roadhouse, which is one of those food brands that is actually doing very good right now, they kept prices pretty low. I mean, about $6 cheaper per check than Outback. And honestly, Texas Roadhouse has a lot more flavor and has a way better menu than Outback Steakhouse. You can go to Texas Roadhouse and for 2 people, you can spend less than $40. That's possible for a 6-ounce sirloin dinner. That's almost unheard of in 2025. So Texas Roadhouse took advantage of that growth. They started hiring more people, improving their stores, their menus, and as a result, their sales have now jumped around 7.7% over the last quarter in 2025. This is in the same casual dining industry that is apparently shrinking. This is the same economy, same inflation, same cost pressures, same everything really. But the difference is that Roadhouse invested in their customers. They realized that people don't have too much money like they used to, or are not willing to spend as much as they used to, so they kept their costs pretty low. I mean, they haven't really increased their costs too much compared to other places. And honestly, another major reason we can attribute the decline of restaurants in 2025 is food quality. Social media like TikTok has made it incredibly easy for people to post and share and expose on just how gross or tiny portion sizes of food have gotten in 2025 in the past few years. I guess this is honestly kind of a healthy thing if you really think about it. We should be more aware of the food that we eat. For slop bowl food, and this is kind of a term that's being used for those food serving lines where you get to choose your own ingredients like Chipotle, Sweetgreen, or Cava. Those are slop bowls or slop restaurants, if you will. Many people have noticed just how food safety has really fallen off a cliff. I've known many people who have gotten sick just after eating Cava because, well, honestly, these employees, they really aren't trained to handle these type of sensitive foods. I mean, you're dealing with like meat, rice, like real ingredients. This isn't just like tossing nuggets in the fryer and just picking it back up 5 minutes later. If you pick up the wrong spoon at a Chipotle or a Cava and you don't close a lid, and unfortunately an employee could make someone seriously ill or worse. There's real data backing up just how risky things have gotten in the so-called slop bowl era. According to the CDC, 1 in 6 Americans, so about 48 million people, they get sick from foodborne illnesses every year. And what's even more concerning here, right, is 40% of restaurant food poisoning outbreaks can actually be traced back to sick workers who showed up to work anyway. And when you have these restaurants having such strict schedules and a lot of punishments for people not showing up and not doing their hours, you get a lot of situations where a lot of sick workers are going to end up going to work and getting other people sick. This is a huge red flag that a lot of people aren't aware about. We kind of have to hold these restaurants more accountable, hold them to a higher standard. If they want to charge us $15 for a burrito, then you better not have any sick employees, and you better offer that employee some sick time and paid time off. And you had one scenario back in 2015 to 2018 where 1,100 customers actually got sick and Chipotle ended up paying a $25 million fine for repeatedly failing to follow its own food and safety procedures. $25 million, I feel like that's pretty low for such a serious offense like that, you know? Just my opinion. So yeah, I mean, we have situations where food prices will go up, but basic food safety standards fall out the window and people ignore them. It's annoying and dangerous, and honestly, we should be pretty mad about this. All these viral stories and newsworthy food recalls, they matter. They add up. They end up doing damage to the overall restaurant's brand. This type of food preparation, like these slop bowl lines, it's a pretty risky business if you think about it, especially if employees aren't feeling too happy with their job. If they have low pay, no benefits, and no time off, you're going to have some pretty bad scenarios. And we've seen that. We've seen people expose those truths on social media. Some people have even noticed that all this food is starting to taste exactly the same. Like, you can order mozzarella sticks from Buffalo Wild Wings, and then you would get the same ones from Applebee's. Somehow they taste just like they came from the same kitchen, except one of them is $5 more than the other one. It's the same thing with chicken tenders. I mean, have you noticed that a lot of chicken tenders are basically the same? There's not much differences in a lot of them. Burgers, spinach dips, you name it. And I'm not really talking about high-end places where you're dropping around $120 on dinner. I mean like the chain restaurants, the ones that regular people can afford. And the truth is that a lot of people don't know that a lot of this food actually comes from the same place. Let me introduce you to Sysco Foods. If you've ever worked in a restaurant, you've probably seen their trucks pulling up at 7 a.m. They're the ones that are supplying frozen, prepared, ready-to-drop food that ends up on menus across America. Here's where it gets pretty wild, right? When chains rely heavily on one company like Sysco, which supplies more than 700,000 restaurants in the country, they end up with menus that are basically copy and paste versions of each other. They're the same. They basically have the same things. They might have different prices, different logo, same appetizers, same sauces, same frozen items. All they do is get reheated or fried. Maybe they're prepared a bit differently. They're put on a different type of plate, but the actual food is the same. That's why those mozzarella sticks taste pretty identical. They're literally identical. They're the same type of food. And because margins have gotten so tight and a lot of these restaurants have become so risk adverse, many chains really aren't innovating. They aren't cooking from scratch like they used to back in the 90s and 80s, you know, and before. A lot of them are cutting labor. They're cutting back of the house staff, and they're leaning more on these pre-made items because they're a lot quicker to prepare, they're cheaper, and they have better profit margins a lot of times.
People just now finding out that like all appetizers are just from Sysco. I've worked in probably 15 different restaurants, and I've seen the same boxes at every one of them. Different states, doesn't matter. It doesn't explicitly say on the menu like cheese from this farm, greens from this farm, from this place. If it's not being advertised that it's local, it's probably from Gordon Foods, Sysco, Chef's Warehouse, Restaurant Depot, one of the things. Not just fried apps, which are definitely the most common things that are bought through Sysco, but desserts, because they don't want to pay for a pastry chef, breads, because they don't want to pay for a baker. Also, a lot of soups, sauces, ranch bases, pretty much anything that they can cheap out on, they will cheap out on. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It would be nice if restaurants had all this kind of money to spend on local farms and support their local economy, and, you know, we all eat really great food from these local farms, but a good chef knows how to take cheap ingredients, turn them into something good, or you can use the cheap ingredients and highlight something better, save your money in certain places in order to buy something really good, really ethical, and really delicious. But it's the unfortunate truth of the restaurant industry. Same thing for bartending. A lot of places use mixes that are all from the same place. All gonna taste the same.
Blandness, different price tag. That is basically how a lot of restaurants are now operating. But here's a bigger problem that this all creates. When every chain serves you the same food, customer loyalty disappears. Why would you pay $15 for chicken Alfredo at one place when you can get the same frozen bag of Sysco Alfredo pasta for around $11 right down the street at another chain. People aren't dumb. They kind of realize this too. Especially now when everyone's kind of watching what they spend. They know that these menus are basically clones of one another. Mid-tier chains are having a hard time to stand out as a result. Think of like places like Hooters, Red Lobster, TGI Fridays, Cheddar's, Outback's collapse. And there's a few winners here that have done a pretty good job, right? In all things considered. Texas Roadhouse, Chili's, and Olive Garden. They've done pretty good over the past few years. But those places have done a lot to keep their prices low. The losers have really become the ones that are charging premium prices for the same pre-bagged generic food that everyone else is serving. Look, the overall decline of restaurants like Chipotle and Sweetgreen shouldn't surprise anyone. An economic environment where consumer confidence is scraping the bottom of the barrel, hiking prices isn't magically going to trick people into spending more. That's not how it works anymore. And honestly, good for Gen Z and millennials for waking up and prioritizing their spending. Maybe paying $18 to $20 for a tiny burrito and guac so a money-hungry CEO can hit his bonuses isn't the smartest move anymore. They realize this. Maybe going to a place that microwaves half of its food or relies on frozen pre-bagged ingredients isn't worth the premium price that they're charging. Unless it's Chili's, right? Which, let's be real, has become America's favorite comfort restaurant. It's awesome. I like Chili's, okay? Most of these other chains, they don't get a pass. They kind of suck. As wallets keep shrinking and food quality refuses to improve, we're going to see more restaurants wobble and ultimately close down. We're going to see them go through a lot of tough times. Not just fast casual and fast food, but mid-tier sit-down chains as well. You know, your Hooters, your TGI Fridays, your Outback Steakhouse. Casual dining has already been in crisis, and it's only getting worse for all of these other restaurants not named Chili's or Texas Roadhouse. If nothing changes, we could easily see a wave of permanent closures over the next few years. A lot of brands could perish here. At the end of the day, people are always going to have to spend money on food, whether they buy groceries or takeout or a sit-down restaurant. But I ultimately think that a lot of people are kind of done getting ripped off. If restaurants want to survive, they have to earn customers back with better value, better food, and better experiences. Emphasis on better value. Stop charging $15 for a burrito. No one wants that. Because the days of charging luxury prices for basic, reheated, assembly line meals or slop bowls, these days are finally catching up to them. They're catching up to all these restaurants. And people have finally said enough is enough. Well, guys, let me know what you think about restaurant prices in the comment section below. Have you gone to any of these chains recently? Have you had a good experience? Have you spent a boatload of money just to receive like microwave meals? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Helps our young channel grow, and it shines a spotlight on issues like this. Well, guys, we'll be back with another video, and like always, stay informed out there.